the early Christianity and early faith, and the church fathers of those days began handling it. Arianism and all and the life schools began to be handled. And Paul was bringing the subject alive again in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. So Paul, the apostle, was dealing with false teaching, something like deception. And that's why in verse 11, he says that from the beginning, even the serpent began by deceiving Eve. And deception continues. And deception is an indication of falsehood and false teaching. And the people that taught it teach it with pride. They pride in teaching falsehood. And there are so many of us who are very happy and delighted to deceive. There are so many deceivers among ourselves. And that is why you have given academic registry hard work in a Christian university to talk about exam integrity, because there is so much deception. So much deception. You know how credible our papers are. There is so much deception. So I don't know whether those who cheat in exams belong to the category of false prophets in a Christian university. No. I don't know where we fall. Pride. They are hype of their personality. Falsehood and false prophets hype us to their personalities. They don't point us to Christ. They point us to their personality, and that's why someone today is not just a prophet, but prophets of the mighty God. And they hype us to their personality. I think it's still the same. There are so many of us who would want to hype people towards what we are, what we do, what we would love to become. And they are pointing of people to themselves rather than to point people to God, who is able to save, deliver, and restore. A self-gratifying kind of ministry and gospel of persuasive words and philosophies. So falsehood thrives in the self-gratifying gospel and ministry, and persuasive words and philosophies of those who delight in falsehood. So then, from today, what do we learn from these texts and from St. Paul the Apostle? Number one, from the texts that we read, is that this text from Paul and his experience, we are drawn to the mind of God and the power in his name. So the first thing that comes here is that Paul draws us to the mind of God and the power in the name of the Lord. Verse 6, as we have read, is written this way: even if I should choose to boast, I will not be a fool, because I will be speaking the truth, but I refrain, so no one will think more of me than is warranted, but what I do or say. So Paul already takes ourselves, or takes the readers of this text away from himself, that he should have boasted. But he says, I am not a fool. So many of us think that by deception we fool people. We are fooling only ourselves. And you know you're fooling yourself. So deception is foolishness, in other words, because you think you are deceiving people by gratifying, glorifying self and your philosophy and your eloquence, but only fooling yourself. Truth will come. And Paul says, so that you do not regard me more than I should be regarded. Humility. Yes, so that people will see God, not you. There are people who take an hour explaining who they are, who they have become, what they have achieved, rather than speaking to people what would help them in their lives. It's deception. If you take too much time making people and hyping them to yourself, I love Paul's approach, says that I should not be regarded more than I should be. And in verse 7, he gives us the reason. He says, to keep me from boasting or from becoming conceited because of these surpassingly great revelations. They laugh, boasting about how God feels. No, God feels himself to everybody. It's not only to the priests, it's not only to the chaplain. God reveals himself to a first year in first semester. God reveals himself not only to the intercessors, not only to the discipleship people, not only to any other, but God is good because he reveals himself to us regardless of our positions. You know, some of us have even worshipped their positions and God has moved away from them. And that's why David takes God to bring Nathan to him, to speak to him that, you great man, you have sinned. And he knew how to bring the message to him. Because, yes, we are in whatever position, you are chairman. Yes, you are chairman. But does it mean that God reveals to you because you are a chairman? No. Yes, you are chaplain, but does it mean that God reveals to himself because I'm not? God reveals to us if we choose not to be foolish, to deceive ourselves, to be proud, and to be conceited because there is revelations from God. And God brings his mind to our lives to reveal himself when we are empty of ourselves. Because when we be full of ourselves, God has no place to fill. What he chooses for our lives to happen and what he chooses not to happen. And that's why Paul says, a tormentor of Satan is given to me. Every one of us has a prick, something that makes you painful, that makes you shed tears, things that you don't tell anybody. There are those weaknesses we have said, and there are those ones that we don't say. And they are the prickers, the things that make us painful to remain humble. There are people, unless God puts a thorn in their flesh, they will step on everybody. Hello? These things that are very dear to you that you have not shared with anybody, but they are making you cry every day. They even made you cry this morning. That you have cried to the Lord to take it away from you, and God is not taking it away to make you humble, to keep you focused on him, on the sufficiency of this God. And God chooses what will happen to us. We don't have choice. And that's why even Jesus Christ cried and struggled with God and told God, let this cup pass away, but only by your will. So if Jesus, fully divine and fully human, could struggle to accept the word or the will of God, we also have so many ways to struggle to accept it, because sometimes, many times, the will of God is not our desires. We desire, but even our supervisor is transferred to another department. But God will keep that supervisor to continue making you humble.